different time than Wednesday night, our usual 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And one of our things that we want to do for the people going into 2022 is start a new interview segment to our show. Now, don't get me wrong. That's how we started. That's where our roots are, right? Through our interviews.
I was going to say, don't get it twisted, Rob. Okay, because if you go back and you're really a fan of Sweep the Rack and you listen to the earliest stuff we did, this was it. This is what I love.
Yeah, I know.
This is what I started this podcast for. So we've gotten away from that a little bit, right, over the last year and a half, pandemic, et cetera. And we decided to go a little more interactive and transition to video. And the podcast is undergoing many changes people have seen. But we're back on it, Rob. We're back on it on a big way.
Yes, the big way. And this interview is extremely, extremely exciting for me, just due to the fact where I grew up watching bowling in the 80s. I was born in 81.
Born in 80.
What's that?
Born in 80. I was born in 80.
The gentleman we're having on was on TV every Saturday on ABC on the Wide World of Sports Saturday afternoon. We watched every week, and the funny story is, and we'll bring Marshall on here because I like to spoil it. We will bring on here Marshall Holman, who it's
legend,
a legend, and my brother's first words as a baby was Marshall Holman. And I can't wait to tell him that because my mom will always say that,
that's wild. That's
seriously,
wild.
Yeah,
that's a little,
he was
that's a little
pointing
creepy,
at the
actually.
TV. Pointing at the TV going, Mar Holman. And my mom didn't know what he was saying and then saw it was Marshall's bowling. And it says, he didn't even say mom, daddy, like any of that. It was Marshall Holman. So this is exciting. This is an exciting interview for me, Mike.
All right, well, Rob, let's start off, this transition here, bring in the legend, Mr. Marshall Holman. Welcome to Sweep the Rack for the first time.
Thank you, Mike. Rob, I appreciate it. Good to be here.
And we want to say straight off, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it. As we said in the intro, like when we started this podcast a few years ago, this is why we started it, to bring out the great stories in bowling, bring out the stories behind the great personalities in bowling. And I mean, listen, who that describes you to a T, I think. So first thing we want to start with is to get off on a sad note a little bit. We know that you were close with Mark Roth, and we wanted to offer our condolences on his passing. And obviously, I mean, what can you say? Another legendary figure in the sport of bowling. But we wanted to, get your thoughts here on Sweep the Rack on the impact of Mark Roth on bowling in general.
Well, his impact was huge. I mean, the father of the modern game. He was really the first player that made, putting a lot of energy on the ball cool. Although if you take a look at the videos, and there've been a lot of them out there lately, really to showcase what Mark did back in the day, he didn't hook the ball very much because nobody hooked the ball very much. But Mark had the power on the ball that would trip out that half 10 when another player couldn't do it. So he definitely changed the game. I've been in communication with his wife Denise over the last few weeks, and she's she's kind of lost right now. She can't believe that he's gone. Although, he had his first stroke in 2008 or 9, and his health has been not good for many years, and so, eventually the body just gives out, and I mean, we miss Mark, and we will not forget Mark. I didn't realize till my career was over what an impact he had on my game, because as an up and coming player back in, I think it was 76, I think it was before I won the Tournament of Champions. Mark asked me to be his doubles partner, to which I said yes to in a millisecond. And that gave me so much confidence. I already had pretty good confidence in my own game, but if Mark Roth thinks I'm good, well, if I can be good enough to be his partner, I must have something going on. And that enabled me to be a better player. So Mark's impact is huge, and he leaves a big hole in in our game, in our world, and I'll never be able to call him up on the phone and say hi to him again. And but he's out of pain, and I know that his last few years were difficult, and he is amazing. He's the like I said, the father of the modern game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when the news broke that he passed, I mean, I think what you said there about him being the father of the modern game was something that was, echoed across the anybody that was talked to in the bowling community, even bowlers today. You talked about the impact he had on your own game. That impact is still being seen in young players today, great players today. So yeah, for sure, can't be overstated.
And what's interesting about a strange coincidence. The day that he passed, I do bowl in a league on Tuesday nights. I bowl with an old buddy of mine who basically the reason we bowl is so Jerome will still stay active. He's 86 years old, throws the ball maybe 10 miles an hour, has the worst carry of anybody I've ever seen. Still makes great shots, but at that speed, the ball doesn't hit with a darn. But I happened to be when I got the call from Tom Clark, commissioner of the PBA, telling me that Mark had passed. I was in a bowling center. I was actually getting a ball drilled. I've been working with Motive for the last couple of years, so I was getting a new Motive ball, Motive Pride, getting it drilled out, and I was actually practicing, which it just I practice once in a blue moon. I mean, I bowl on Tuesday nights, and I don't practice. It doesn't. I don't think it does my 67-year-old game all that much good to practice. I still bowl okay, but okay, averaging 225 in league to me is like being a 190 bowler. If the pros came in and bowled on my shot, it would be stupid. They'd never miss. Never. So, I don't want to knock all you league bowlers down a notch or two. But if you're averaging 220, 230,
250,
yeah,
250. If you're shooting 800 every third week, go ahead, Marshall. Go ahead.
It's league bowling. It's recreational bowling. It's made to be fun. I remember years ago when the tour came to Lava Lanes in Medford for what was the Earl Anthony tournament, which, by the way, I always thought was the most ridiculous thing in the world. As much as I loved Earl, and if anybody deserved to have a tournament named after him, it was Earl Anthony. It just didn't necessarily need to be in Medford, Oregon. I believe this is my town. But anyway, so we're bowling the Earl Anthony tournament, and there's this friend of mine who's it doesn't matter. He happens to be left-handed. It doesn't matter if he's left-handed, right-handed, whatever. He's bowling in the qualifying to try and get a spot to bowl in the tournament. And he's 225 to 30 average bowler. And they put down the tour shot, and he averaged a little over 150. Congratulations. Welcome to real bowling.
Oh, Marshall, I got to jump in here because Mike, oh, wait. I can't hear you, Mike.
All right. Can we go there for a minute?
Yeah, because Marshall, I don't know if you know this, but every week Mike bowls in a sport league Tuesday nights, and he does a league recap, and he averages bowls like 500, 550. He has some
I'm bowling so bad this season. I'm struggling so bad. I'm not going to get into the details, but I'm struggling really bad. I bowled some sub 500 series. I mean, there's been some atrocious nights out there because they are that challenging. But go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, bless you. And we always are campaigning to the people like this is different. And I think we're trying to educate the public, right, on what the pros bowl on the US Open compared to what you bowl on your normal league night. And I think that's a really important part of today's game where there is a lot of uneducated people out there that think they could average 225 on league, that they think they could bowl on TV and beat them who are, because they are averaging 220 in league. Yeah. So, we talk about that all the time. So when you talk about that, different world.
Yeah. The thing that I said recently is that the separation between the recreational side of the game and the sports side of the game has never been greater than it is right now. And
I agree. I agree. And with the atomic bombs that are being made by the manufacturers, they make that recreational bowler even that much better because he's getting pin action like he probably doesn't deserve. I remember when they first started coming out with the more dynamic bowling balls, and I saw Ernie Schlegel leave a solid 9. That's when I knew something wasn't right because his ball didn't hook hardly at all.
Right.
But the solid 9 is almost like the new solid 4.
Interesting. All right, Rob, let's jump here because I
Yeah.
know that we had this on our list of topics to cover, and I think it fits right in with this part of the conversation. Even though, Mr. Holman, I would love to sit here and talk to you for all the time we have about this particular issue. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to point people back to this interview when they tell me what their thoughts are on this and tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But let's move forward. Your career was interesting because you won. I mean, you dominated the '80s. You were dominant in the '80s. You had 6 seasons in a row where you won $100,000 or over in the '80s. You won several majors in the '80s.
It actually started before you were born. It was from my good years were 77 through the mid 80s.
Okay. So then there was a long period of time where you didn't have that same kind of success, and then things fast forward to '96, I believe, where you win your final title. Right. So coinciding, obviously, if you grew up when Rob and I grew up, or you were bowling during that time, coinciding with that, everyone knows was really the explosion of reactive equipment. Right. So one thing that Rob and I wanted to ask you and talk to you about was your feelings on the development of reactive equipment, how that impacted your game and your success. Rob, we actually discovered a blurb in an article. Rob, I know you had that pulled
Yeah.
up. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was a Bowl in This Month article where they actually asked you about that. And that's kind of why we wanted to bring it up, because we thought that was interesting, because I still feel like if reactive resin wasn't made, I feel like you might have been able to gone ahead and maybe win as many titles as Earl had. Now I just kind of wanted your thoughts on like what that or the blurb of the Bowl in This Month said, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I was still bowling well. I was actually player of the year in '87, and I bowled well up through the late '80s, even 1990. Then when reactive came in, it basically forced players to look at the lanes differently. Instead of controlling the heads, you had to look at a break point. And it was like going from reading English to reading Greek. And one of the things that made me such a great player was I could figure things out my way. But that's also what put me in a slump because I was stubborn, and instead of trying to retool my game to fit the new equipment, I kept trying to make it work the way that it always worked for 15 years, and it didn't work. And as far as '96 is concerned, and my winning that last tournament, that was a very strange throwback week. The conditions were like going back 10 years. So it was like bowling a tournament from the '80s. All of a sudden, the lanes made sense to me again. And even though I hadn't bowled with a darn in years, once you've won a number of times, you remember that feeling of how to win, and you can continue to, you can do well. And so I was able to win. I bowled against a great competitor and now a very good friend of mine, Wayne Webb, and I won that tournament. I think he qualified 4th or 5th, and I can remember thinking as I was the number 1 qualifier, the only person I don't want to bowl in this field is Wayne Webb, and of course that's who I ended up getting. And then I fortunate to win the match, but the lanes played like they played in the '80s. Had I have spent the time like Pete Weber did, Pete Weber went through a slump when the reactives came out, but he figured them out. I I never did figure them out, and then I started doing television, and when I started doing CBS, they asked me not to bowl anymore, and which I thought was like that's the greatest thing ever. I feel like a farmer who's getting paid not to grow crops. So I stopped bowling and did TV for a while, and I wish I would have been a little more diligent and worked on my game and stayed involved. But it is what it is, and now I went from being one of the best players in the game to being one of the better players in my league. That's a big fall.
Well, I mean, to have that fall, you have to have reached those heights, though.
Yeah. No, thank you.
I mean, something to be said for that, for sure. Here's my follow up to that. I loved, you said basically the exact same thing that was said in the article, that you didn't do a good enough job of adapting to what was going out there. Kind of a stubborn way of looking at it. Not sure if you follow social media and professional bowlers today, but over the last, what would you say, Rob, year or two, there's been some public comments from numerous players about conditions, about the favoring of certain styles, and I'll leave it at that. Is it safe to assume, based on the answer that you just gave to that question, that your perspective on that would be no, adjust and do what's needed to survive in this environment?
Well, you can only be as good as the era that you're dropped into. Now, I was fortunate when I first went on tour. A lot of guys, I remember like Dave Husted, good friend of mine, great Hall of Fame player. Dave came out on tour, and he had to kind of figure out the tour conditions and how to make it work for him. I came out on tour, and it was as if they were saying, "Okay, Marshall, go have some fun. These lanes are perfect for you." And so, they were, and I didn't have to do much adjusting. You have to do the best you can, whatever era you're in. And as far as the bowling balls are concerned, the players of the day have nothing to do with the bowling balls. They just have to make them work. So you have to do the best you can in whatever time frame you're involved in. And I know the lanes and the balls are. It's always been a controversy, forever. And then you throw in the two-handers, and that becomes a controversy, especially with the bowlers from my era. That there are some outspoken people that think that should never have been allowed. And I really like watching the two-handers. I mean, watching Belmonte in full flight is just amazing, and what Kyle Troop is doing is astounding. But on the other hand, the most critical part of my game, what made me able to excel, was to make sure that I cleared the thumb properly. The two-handers never have to clear the thumb. If I had never had to worry about clearing the thumb, I'd have won a lot more tournaments. But it is what it is. They're not doing anything out of the rules, and more power to them.
All right, well said. How did you get into bowling? Give us your history in the game.
I watched a Saturday afternoon broadcast when I was 12 years old, and I asked my father to take me bowling. Just as simple as that. We went down to Medford Lane, which is no longer there here in Medford, and I bowled on lane 23. I bowled one game. I shot 71, not 171, just 71. I was no prodigy, but I enjoyed it. So I joined the league. And I remember my first year in league, once again, not being a prodigy, I averaged 99, not 199. And I started skiing the next year. So I stopped bowling when I was 13. And for some reason, it called me back. And I started bowling when I was 14. And I never missed a day. From the ages of 14 through 17, I bowled virtually every day. And that's how you take repetition and passion. And that's how you get good at pretty much anything. Plus, having a natural ability is vital as well. I was watching this golf tournament with Tiger Woods playing with his son, and he said you got to do it like Ben Hogan said. You got to dig it out of the dirt. You've got to have the repetitions and the passion, and so that's how I became a good bowler. And then I had an opportunity to go on tour in '74. and I made a couple of telecasts early in my career. Did not bowl well on TV, but making those top fives gave me the confidence that, hey, I think I can do this. And, thinking you can, and I tell this to youngsters all the time, whether it's sport or school or relationships, if you think you can do something, then you're well on the road to doing it. And if you get the other attitude, you got no chance.
So, Marshall, so growing up, when did exactly you start to realize that you could be good enough to actually go on tour? Because there's a lot of kids that are growing up there now when they're 12 or 13, 15 years old, that they might think they're good enough to go on tour. So when was it exactly you realized that you were good enough to actually go on tour?
It wasn't until I actually did, because, I grew up in a small town and the tour never came here. So I never got to see the tour bowlers. I watched them on TV, and I had this thought of pro bowlers being like these robot-like perfect bowlers, never make mistakes. And so I never really thought about it. I did go to Portland and Seattle, and I bowled against Earl and other touring pros, and I fared fairly well against them. But it wasn't until I actually went out there that I felt like, I have a chance. I figured, okay, this guy's going to sponsor me on the tour. I'll I'll bowl for 6 months or a year or whatever, and then I'll go to college. And I clicked, and things worked, and so I didn't go out on tour thinking I was the next thing at all.
So was it until would you say you really made your statement when you were the youngest person to ever win the Tournament of Champions at 21? Would you say that's kind of when you made your stake?
That was huge. It was the year prior. Like I said, I made a telecast in Tucson and then in Edison, New Jersey, in my 5th and 7th tournaments, and then I didn't bowl very well toward the fall, and I got a new sponsor in 1975, and he didn't give me a very good deal, but it was the only deal I had. So he said, "Okay, we'll give you 8 tournaments, and then we'll see how you do, and then we'll figure it out from there." And in the first 8 tournaments, I made 5 top 24s and cashed the other 3 events. So I got off to a good start, and won a couple tournaments later that year against my, one of the reasons I love bowling so much was because I love watching Harry Smith and Carmen Salvino. And I won my first 2 tournaments beating Carmen Salvino, which that gave me not only a complete elation, but it also gave me a lot of confidence, because he was somebody who I totally looked up to, and I'm fortunate to say that we're still good friends to this day. He just turned 88 last month, and I gave him a call, had a lovely conversation with him, and I think 75 winning those 2 tournaments, that was huge, and then winning the Tournament of Champions was really icing on the cake, and something that was not expected. I was never in the top 5 until the last game. I bowled Dick Weber. He was in 5th place, and I was in 6th place in the position round on Friday evening, and the winner was going to make the show. And I was too oblivious to even realize that I didn't belong on the same pair of lanes as Dick Weber, let alone beat him. And I think I shot 250 something, and I went from 6th place all the way to qualified 2nd, and then went on to win the next day. But pretty amazing.
That's awesome. That's just
amazing.
That's just so to people like us, to bowling fans like us, it's just amazing to get that kind of insight. All right, we're touching on different stuff here. We're trying to touch on the best things that we can here, given the time. You were sponsored by Nike.
Yeah.
How'd that come about?
I think Gary Mage, who was the tournament director for the Western and Northwest region for many years, he acted as like my agent back in the day, and he brokered the deal with Nike. I think I believe they approached him, and they wanted me both from the standpoint of that I was an Oregon guy, and I was a whack job. And they liked to have people that were exciting,
Yes.
like a McEnroe or like I was back in the day.
Sure.
So we were together. Nike and I were together from 85 through 87. Also on that staff were Dave Husted, another Oregon guy, Mark Baker, and Mike Albee. And I was sort of the lead guy on the staff, and things were actually going well. The reason that it disappeared in '87 was it didn't quite have the love from above. From the upper end, Phil Knight and his upper executive team. So it was beating projections. They were doing well. It was awesome to be a part of it. But it disappeared, in late '87. But I still have a relationship with Nike, and I have friends that work up there, and I haven't been up there since the pandemic, but I would get up to, and go see some of my buddies up there and go to the employee store and get some swag and maybe once or twice a year. But it's been a while since I've been up there, but that was really fun. And I wish that could come back. I do know that the top bowlers of the day, they may not have a sponsor at the level of Nike that I had, back in the '80s. But I was just looking at Kyle Troop, and he posted on Facebook after being named Player of the Year. Congratulations, Kyle. Well deserved. He thanked all his sponsors. This is a pretty long list. So he's. I think bowling is it's changed so much over the years, but one thing has stayed the same. If you really want to make decent money in bowling, you got to be one of the top guys. It's not. Unfortunately, it's not like golf, where there are 98 out of the top 100 last year made $1 million. It's basically you need to be in that upper, maybe 5 or 10 players to really make some decent, some good, serious money. And I applaud the guys of today, and I want to see them. I want to see them succeed. I'm a fan. I enjoy it. I still get to do a little bit of work in bowling. I'll be going back in I believe it's on March 6th, the telecast for the Roth Holman doubles, and Denise Roth will be there. I look forward to seeing her, and then I'm a team captain for the Milwaukee team in the PBA league. So a couple projects a year. So I still get to keep my hand in it.
So Marshall, how Bill O'Neill is a really close and best friend of Brooklyn, of me and Big Mike here.
Oh, sure.
How do we broker a Jordan sponsorship for Bill O'Neill through you? I mean, this is what we need though in the sport, and we talked a little bit off air about this, but we need like a Nike or a big, a flagship sponsor to come in and take maybe a Bill O'Neill or a Sean Rash or a Kyle Troop or Belmonte and make them into like a Jordan type player. How is that possible in today's game, or is it?
Or what does the game need? What do the players need to change to make that more of a possibility?
I think one of the things that's always made bowling not look as spectacular as it is that anybody can throw a strike. They may not be able to throw it, like the top players. They certainly can't throw it like the top players, but they can strike. They can't hit a 300+ yard drive. They can't dunk the ball, but they could throw a strike. So in some ways, bowling looks so simplistic that it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And then we can go back to what we were talking about earlier with league bowlers averaging, 230, 240, 250. I think one guy, he's led the average the last couple of years, averaging 260. Is that? I think I read that, and so that doesn't lend itself to giving bowling the credibility that it deserves. And I wish that the bowlers had a bigger pie of assets to shoot for, but the new ownership, Bolero is doing what they feel is best for the tour and for their brand, and I wish them well. I want to
Sure.
see them succeed because bowling was my world for so many years.
Do you think they've done a good job so far?
I think they've switched things up. I'm old school, so I'd like to see more tournaments like we had back in the day. But I'm not making decisions. I'm just hoping that what they do is for the best. So as far as my opinions of what they're doing, I agree with some of what they've done, and I disagree with others. But they're not consulting me, and they don't need to. I mean, they've got bright people. Coley is doing the best that she can, and I wish like I said, I wish them
Sure.
well. I'm not. I wouldn't want to be in the position of having to make those kind of decisions. And as far as going back to tournaments, with 18 games of qualifying and 24 games of match play, that would be, I think, for a credibility standpoint in winning events, that'd be great. But they're trying to package up marketable things for today's world. So that's what their deal is.
Okay.
So let me ask something. And you said something really interesting, Marshall, in the statement about Nike signing you on because you were, was it quote unquote you were whacked out or crazy or whatever it was. A whack job. Okay. So I know that there was a 10-game suspension for kicking a foul like back in the day. We read that was probably back in like the 80 season, and it definitely seemed like a really long suspension compared to what they're levying out today's game, right? But do we need? Look, Pete Weber is known for also probably being whacked, crazy too.
He took over for me.
Okay, there you go.
When I left, then Pete put on the black hat and he wore it well.
Sure. So I've always been campaigning in the show for years that we need more people who are quote unquote entertainers yet bowlers, right? Sure. And Kyle Troop is kind of taking that, I think, on, and he might be the next one. But I guess so. My question is that how you make bowling more entertaining, and is that how you bring in more sponsorships like Nike? If you, let's just say, get multiple Pete Webers and multiple Marshall Holmans bowling against each other, and would that bring in the sponsors and ratings?
That would help. I mean, it would help if you have healthy rivalries with exciting players. That would definitely help. Getting back in the day when I first started, up through my productive years, basically we had ABC, NBC, and CBS. Everybody got good ratings. Everybody got pretty good rights money. In today's world, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of outlets. We don't have a Saturday afternoon spot where we're following Wild World of Sports, where we have a built-in audience. It's much more difficult to get the ratings that it's impossible to get the ratings that we had back in our day. And part of that was only having three outlets, and part of it was there was a fantastic dynamic between Earl, Mark, and myself. And on any given Saturday, one, two, or all of us were going to be on that telecast. And so that's what the viewing public looked forward to. Even though you might ask and they say, "Oh, I root for the underdog." Well, people do root for underdogs, but they like to see people they're familiar with. So with Earl and Mark and myself being up there as often as we were, that built a good base for the fans to watch and enjoy.
I remember as a kid, probably in the early to maybe even mid 90s, waking up on a Saturday morning, and the newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer at least, used to print who made the show for that day. And when I would wake up on a Saturday morning,
And see
the
Marshall
first
and
thing
Mark.
I would do is I would go into the kitchen and I would grab the paper. The sports page was usually on top, so that was my dad was reading, and I would look up who was on the show. And what you just described with either you or Mark or Earl being on the show. I mean, obviously you can go to whatever era you want. You have those same guys, right?
Sure.
But yeah, as a fan, we got that feeling too, right? Of like, oh, Marshall's on the show today, or it might be Marshall against Earl, or it might be Ozio against Albie today. Oh, we're gonna get to see that. So yeah, there was definitely a certain build up there that I think, and I think there's positives and negatives to this too. Like, you don't have that today because everything is so instant and everything is so out there and available all the time. There's really no build up to, the anticipation of who's there. I mean, obviously the positive of that is that today with technology, et cetera, you watch the whole tournament if you want. You can sit and follow the player that you want to follow the whole time, which would have been great to do back in your era and back in your day.
I can't imagine being a bowler back in my day with social media. In my early career, I would have gotten absolutely tortured. It would have been interesting, but you're right. I mean, it's you can follow anybody you want now.
Yeah, you would have had a lot of haters. You would have had a lot of you should. We've told other professional bowlers who have come on this show that we've done interview with, don't read the comments. If social media was around when you were bowling, I definitely would have told you don't read the comments.
Really?
No question.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's like Pete Weber or Belmo, even, like, either you love him or you hate him, right? And to me, that makes a great personality, and that makes a great, somebody on TV. Look, anybody who's at the top of the game or top of their sport is going to have people who love him, people who hate him. Tiger Woods, we were talking about, right? Who's playing right now. Haters, lovers, like, LeBron James, right? Haters, people. So
Tom Brady. But it brings the eyes, it brings the viewers too, though.
I don't know if people. I don't think Kyle Troup has too many people that hate him.
No,
he's really a good guy. I mean, extraordinarily talented, and just a very nice, polite young man. I don't know who could hate him except maybe the jealous players that aren't as good as him.
Honestly, Marshall, I
was going to say, give it time.
No.
Give it time.
I've talked to casual bowlers who they hate the fact that he dresses the way he dresses because they think it's actually making a mockery of the game. Like,
that's what I thought at first, but that's just Kyle being Kyle. His father Guppy back in my day. He was a guy with the strange yellow pants and the strange green pants that they made two pair of pants out of, one yellow and one green, one leg, one yellow, one green. And Guppy was weird and he dressed strangely, but Kyle has taken it to a different level. First time I ever saw Kyle in one of those outfits that he wears, I thought that was odd. But it's helped to build his brand.
Smart.
Yes.
It is. You're right. You're 100% right about that. That the differences in him are what helped build his brand, and that's what And now he's the best bowler on the planet right now. I mean, he just got announced as Player of the Year the other day. So you take the marketing aspect that he has, and you combine that with the actual backing it up with the play and the high level play. And I think you have a little something there. All right, we're going to start wrapping up soon. I got to ask you about one more thing because we do our research here at Sweep the Rack. We try and do our research here, and I'm going to try and phrase this question as best I can to not be negative about it in another sense, but. You strike me first. You're involved in a winery or wine company, yes, and generally you strike me as a guy who, when you were making money bowling, you strike me as a guy who did the right thing with his money and has been successful. Am I right about that?
A percentage of it.
Okay.
I wasn't the brightest young man when I was making big money back in the 70s, early 80s. But I did invest a portion of it, and I'm doing okay. And a lot of guys in my position, aren't doing as well.
That's why I asked. That's
Yeah.
that's why I asked. Like, what were some of the smart moves and not? And I guess if you want to tell us some of the not so smart moves, we'd like to hear a story or two there too, in terms of what you did and why things kind of worked out for you in the long run. Because again, I didn't want to be negative about it and
No, that's fine.
focus on the guys that maybe didn't have such a great didn't turn out so great for. But I think for you, I see that it did. So. What were the smart moves? And if you want to tell us some of the dumb things you did too, I mean, if you went out and bought some cars or something, we'll hear about that too.
Yeah. Back probably in the late 70s, I remember talking to a man by the name of Junior Powell, who was originally from Toledo, but he was one of Don Carter's business partners with Don Carter's Lanes back in the day. And he said something that stuck with me immediately. He said, "Marshall, the easy part is making the money. Hanging on to it. That's the trick." And so that sort of shook my brain a little bit. And I just started, getting a retirement account started. And, if you start young, that can build into something pretty nice as you get older. As far as the stupid things I did, I was a terrible gambler.
Okay.
Terrible. And fortunately,
what'd you like to play? What'd you like to play?
Oh, I like to play blackjack, and I like to play craps, and it was not unusual for me to not go to sleep in Vegas until I had no money in my pocket. So now it's not as bad as you might think, because I would probably lose $1,000, $1,500 in a week, which was a lot of money back then. But it never affected my bowling. I always still bowled well there, but it took a few years till I finally figured out, I'm not good at this. I'm a good bowler. I'm a terrible gambler. I quit. So I quit gambling, and so that was a big thing. I probably have a small 5-figure sum sitting in Las Vegas that I'm never chasing, and they can have it. And if I would have kept that money and invested it, it'd be worth a small 6-figure sum or whatever. But so that was one of the stupid things I did. And as far as the cars and stuff, I never went too crazy in that regard. But I used to spend money with little regard, because I was making 6 figures a year back in the 70s and the 80s. But like I say, fortunately, I did invest a fairly substantial part of what I made, and today I live a comfortable lifestyle. I have I do have a part-time job. I got the greatest part-time job for a newly retired person. I'm a driver at a upper end retirement community, and I interact with all these elderly overachievers who are interesting and appreciative. So it's a fun work environment. It gives me something to do a few days a week. I still play golf a few days a week, and life in Medford, Oregon for me is good.
I would imagine that those old people, the people at the old people's home, they're in for some shit when they go for a day of bowling with you. No, when you drive into the lanes.
Gone bowling. Some of them know me from back in the day.
Okay.
They were bowling fans, and they know me, and we have fun conversations. And
that's awesome.
But the majority of the people there, they don't know who I am. They just know that I'm there to help them, and being in an environment where you're helping people it's not only is it wonderful for them, but it makes you feel good in here, and you can't put a price on appreciation, and so I'm happy with my part-time work environment. I have a nice life here with my girlfriend Tina and our golden retriever Stella. And
I got a golden retriever too.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I put the camera. He's sleeping right next to me, actually.
Yeah, I'd say Stella's parked on the carpet somewhere. Yeah, she's pretty chilled out. But yeah, it's things.
Now, you mentioned gambling. I got to ask you this: how about gambling on bowling? You got any action stories for us from back in the day of traveling around? Did you get involved in that, or not so much?
I grew up in a small town, and I used to bowl in a pot game with these older guys when I was just a kid, but we'd bowl with 25 cents for a 200 game, 25 cents for a clean game, and 25 cents you had the high game, and basically it was just like a benefit for me but I never bowled. I mean, I'd win $10 or $15, whatever. I never bowled in any big time action when I went on tour, and I was given the option to do that. I stayed away from it. I didn't grow up in it. I wasn't from Dallas. I wasn't from New York. I bowled tournament bowling where if you finish second, you still got a pretty good check. In action bowling, if you finish second, you lose. So I never got involved in it. I love some of the stories from back in the day, even the days before I was on tour. I guess there was one guy back in New York who was bowling action, and he had two sponsors. Well, if you have two sponsors, if you lose, you lose. If you win, you lose. So he faked a heart attack, and they took him up on a
it was Bob Perry, Bob Przicki.
Yeah. Was his name? Was it Bob? I know Bob Perry well, and you know what?
I mean, that's a story that's associated with him anyway. I don't, a lot of this stuff is urban legend after so long, and the details get passed down the lane or whatever.
But I don't know if it was Bob Perry, but I knew Bob Perry well, and I liked him. He was always very nice to me. He was a good dude. He was a good bowler back in the 70s, early 80s.
I watched him bowl at the high rollers with my own eyes.
Tough.
The guy made a 6-7 to win a high roller match in the 10th frame. It was the sickest thing I've ever seen.
Is he still with us?
He is.
He is. I've reached out to him. He was one of my guests that I want to bring on and talk all those action stories.
He's got to be early 70s.
Yeah.
I'm 67.
He's a good guy.
I keep looking at this picture of the little box. I'm the guy on the bottom of this box of the three of us, and I keep wondering, who's that old guy that my voice is coming out of?
Well, Marshall, I got to ask before we start letting you go here. Any thoughts about ever bringing back the vintage Marshall Holman mustache? Because to me, that was it. Like,
no, I'm lean and clean.
Okay. Okay.
Easy to manage.
We ask almost every guest that we have on the show, and especially the legends. When we bring the legends on, we have to ask them these two questions. To you, what's the best bowling ball ever? What's your favorite ball ever?
The red U-Dot.
Well, back in my day, it was the Yellow Dot or an Old Crown Jewel. Those are the two balls that I bowled great with. And then in the 80s, the Black U-Dot, Columbia Black U-Dot.
Okay.
Now I'm all about motive. I'm throwing motive stuff, and I don't know what my miles per hour were back in the day, but I didn't throw the ball real hard. I could, but I had decent speed. Now I throw it like 13 miles an hour. That's it. And so, I'm bowling against these younger guys who are throwing at 18, 19 miles per hour. And boy, I'll tell you, in today's game, if you've got some hand with speed, you can knock down a lot of pins. That slow roll, it don't get it done.
Who deserves the title of greatest of all time?
Well, those come in eras.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
It's fair. We get that answer a lot. That's a fair.
Carter had his time.
Okay.
Earl certainly had his time.
Okay.
Mark from 1977 through 1980. He had 3 years in a row where he won like 25 tournaments. So that was pretty awesome. So I'd give him his due.
Walter Ray or Pete. Walter Ray or Pete.
Oh, certainly, and I've excuse me for not naming those two bowlers. Walter, he has transcended so many different eras, which is just unbelievable. Earl Anthony won his tournaments in a relatively short, compacted time frame. Walter has been relevant for decades.
Like Pete, same thing with
Pete. That's why I asked, because that's kind of the next. Like you went older, you went through the generations there. You come to that generation where you have those two guys who had such a long run of success. And
I also think that today's equipment enables bowlers to stay relevant longer.
Mm.
When I was bowling in the 70s, guys in their early 40s, they weren't going to compete against me. They couldn't do it. It didn't happen. And now in the last number of years, look what Norm Duke has done in his 50s. Look what he did in his 50s. It was incredible. He was beating the best players in the world in his 50s. That did not happen back with throwing yellow dots and those kind of balls.
Tom Brady like Norm Duke.
And Tom Brady is continued to be relevant because the rules have him ambulatory in his 40s. If he was playing back 30 years ago when they were allowed to beat the crap out of those quarterbacks, he'd have been done forever ago.
100%.
Fair point. Fair
point.
Very fair point. All right. We're going to wrap it up. Mr. Holman, thank you so much for the time. We greatly appreciate it. This was an amazing experience for Rob and I. Rob, it's been a while since we've gotten to go down the road with one of the legends of the game. So I know you enjoy this as much as I do. From both of us, thank you. Before we get you out of here, tell us, you mentioned Motive a couple times. What are you doing with them? Other people in the bowling community you want to shout out or that you're working with?
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug, take a minute and do so.
Okay, well, I'll do that. As far as Motive is concerned, I've been involved with them for about a year now, and I throw their equipment. I'm more of an ambassador than I am a staff member, because I'm not out there bowling in tournaments. But I've enjoyed the relationship that I have with them, and they make outstanding balls, and they make this old dude better than I probably should be, and so I'm enjoying that. I've been involved with in the wine industry for about 6 years now, and Diamondback.wine. That'll get you to my website, Diamondback.wine. Check it out. And if you would like to have a PBA Hall of Famer be your personal wine concierge, you can always message me on Facebook, and we'll get you hooked up. But Diamondback it's an upper end wine, and our price points are $29 to, I think, near $80 a bottle. So it ain't your father's Ripple. This is the good stuff, and it's a fascinating industry, and I enjoy it. But I'm a bowler. That's what I always was, and that's what I really am. I'm looking forward to getting back to. I think it's going to be in July in Portland, Maine, the PBA League, and as much of a pain it is to get from Medford, Oregon to Portland, Maine, that's where the PBA League needs to be, because that is an unbelievable bowling center. And what Charlie has done back there with that place, and the vibe that you get when you walk into Bayside Bowl is unlike anything. I mean, it's wild. It's almost like you're getting thrown back to my era, where you'd walk into Imperial Lanes in Toledo, or you'd walk into Riviera Lanes in Akron, Ohio. It's amazing what they've done, and I look forward to that.
All right, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Rob, but I think Mr. Holman just copped to being a patch pirate. Did he just cop to being a patch pirate? I think. I want to explain. Patch pirates are a term that we stole from the fishing community that we're now using for the bowling community. It describes this: someone who doesn't really compete at a high level. League bowler, like you talked about earlier. They're easy, whatever. But they have some kind of ball deal. They get the ball deal. They get the ball shirt, etc. So
yeah,
I hate to end the interview this way. I cannot believe
Mike.
I'm going to do this, but I'm going to end the interview by calling you out for being a patch pirate. I'm sorry.
This guy, he's a PBA Hall of Famer, 22 titles. This guy is not even close.
Oh my God!
Get out of here.
It's great to still be involved in the game, and I thank Motive for letting me be a small part of their business, and I'm just I feel very fortunate. My two contemporaries from back in the day. Earl was 17 years older than me, but he was definitely my contemporary. And Mark, who just passed away, Earl's been gone since 2001. Mark died 3 weeks ago, and I'm still, living the dream. So I'm a lucky guy.
And we hope you're around for quite a long time to come. Obviously, Mr. Holman, we'll catch you at Bayside Bowl during the summer. We'll see you there. Maybe a glass of wine on us. We appreciate the time. Thank you again. It was an awesome experience for us. If you want, there was some stuff we didn't get to. If you want to come back on throughout the PBA season and, get involved in the conversation on what's going on this season and some of the bowling, by all means, you got an open invite whenever you want to come. The legends are always welcome here, and we appreciate it again.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Rob, thank you very much.
You, Marshall. We appreciate it.
Thanks. I know you're hype. You're hype.
First off, I would love to sit at a winery and drink high-end wine with Marshall and talk old tour stories.
We might have to go there. Rob, we might have to go there instead of Bayside Bowl.
Honestly, I would love to hear about some of the stories or the one things we didn't get into, and I'd love to talk about Marshall with Marshall is some of his rivalries that he had on tour, right? Because you can't go as long as he's had winning, but also he was an emotional, fiery guy too. And I'm sure that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I would have loved to get into that topic. Maybe when we bring him on, we'll talk about that. But
yeah,
I told you when Marshall, was communicating with me about how we were bringing him on, I said, Mike, this is gotta be my first interview we've done, and we've interviewed some of the greats, right? We interviewed Walter Ray, we've interviewed, Nelson Burton Jr. I'm this is the guy that I grew up this was, him and Mark Roth and Earl Anthony, and these are the guys that I grew up watching every Saturday, and you grew up watching every Saturday, and you talked about the paper and looking for them. When you saw Marshall Holman on the telecast, it was okay, this is awesome, and it was because of the fact one, he was fiery and he was emotional. And I talk about that all the time. It makes you want to keep watching, and it's almost you're not sure what he's going to do, right?
It gives fans something to root for or root against, like we talked about in the interview, 100%. Right? You might be a fan, you might not, but it gives you something to root for or root against. Say, listen, I'm gonna make this about me. Did you all hear what he said about the lanes? Did you all hear? Did you all hear what he said?
You can't argue.
That was a legend
right?
speaking. That wasn't Big Mike speaking. That was a legend speaking. Let's be clear about it. All right. So anytime, Rob, from this point forward, anytime I get involved in a conversation with somebody who tries to go in the other direction, I'm going to tell them, look, you don't want to hear from me. Go back and hear from the legend. Sweep the rack. Check it out. All right, Rob, listen, we're going to wrap it up. It's Sunday morning. It's Sunday morning out by you. It's Sunday afternoon out by me. Football is coming on in a few minutes. I'm going to try and sneak in these few last-minute bets here. Great interview. I'm sure we'll tease this on Wednesday. We'll have some of it for the people, and we'll post this to our YouTube soon.
Yeah, and I'll probably talk more Wednesday but I'm thinking posting maybe Christmas Eve, maybe give people a Christmas present.
Okay. All right.
Christmas present.
The people have to see. Rob, enjoy your Sunday. Have a great rest of the weekend. And I'm just going to tell everybody to, number one, subscribe to our YouTube, because we're going to. This is just the first in a string of great pieces of content that we're going to be putting out, over the near future. So subscribe to our YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, and be on the lookout for more interviews. We got a lot of heat coming. Rob, take it easy.
All right,
later.
You are now listening to Sweep the Rack podcast featuring Brooklyn Rob and Big Mike.